Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Esteemed FaceTime with Leaders, an initiative by World Development Corporation. I'm Vinu Anand at World Development Corporation. FaceTime with Leaders is a platform for industry titans to share their experiences, thoughts, ideas, and best practices in order to inspire one another and future leaders. In a nutshell, we attempt to encapsulate the multi-decadal learnings acquired by these industry leaders. We also hope that by conducting these FaceTime with Leaders interviews, we can bring together a global community of eminent personalities. By bringing together such visionaries on one platform, we hope to play a part in inspiring the lives of other leaders. Great learnings from great leaders. It undoubtedly assists everyone by identifying, nurturing, and using the trade secrets that are proven success formulae for many. And this is what we aim for with these sessions by making them a gathering of industry stalwarts and a knowledge-sharing community. We have one such industry stalwart on FaceTime with Leaders with us today, Mr. Nitin Kothari. In a career spanning over 4 decades, he has proven to be a professional engineer, manager, and leader par excellence. With a chemical engineering degree from the prestigious Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, his academic foundation was further strengthened by the Postgraduate Diploma in Business Management and numerous short-term management courses in Europe and the United States, undertaking in collaboration with premium management institutes. His diverse and multifunctional leadership experience has endowed him with in-depth knowledge of all business functions, culminating in 17 years of successful country P&I management in the global and Indian industrial landscapes. His exceptional track record boasts a consistent 20% CAGR in profitable business growth over 1.5 decades. So, Mr. Kothari, to begin with, could you let our viewers know in brief about your career journey so far?
Thank you very much, Vinu, for an overwhelming introduction that you have made for me. It also reflects back on my own career path in a very short and a sweet way at this point of time. Let me take you back to answer your question on my career path that I've had in a couple of minutes in terms of the introductions which are there. I graduated from IIT Kharagpur in 1982. Had the choices of migrating to US, but I chose not to do that, mainly because I was more interested and excited about the future of India as an organization, as a country, and the tremendous growth potential that we would have in the Indian environment at this point in time. And I started my career in being a chemical engineer. I started my career in the manufacturing sector, wearing a boiler suit and safety shoes, and worked in the production for a year and a half with a Shell joint venture with Nozzle, really in a petrochemical plant. Excellent learning for a chemical engineer in the plant. Then moved into process designing, again, a technical function, process designing and project management with a company called Century Inca, where I spent almost 4 years. And then a similar role in Century Inca was a classical Indian managed company, which was there, although they had a foreign collaboration in the field of nylons and polyesters. And then 11 years I was with a Swedish company called Alfa Laval India. Initially in the technical roles, but later on I realized that being technically good is good, but not sufficient enough to grow further in the career management in a shorter span of time, being slightly more ambitious than my peers at that point of time, and then moved into what I would call it as the sales and marketing function at that point of time. So reasonably well defined, more than 5, 6 years of sales and marketing career in the capital goods industry, which Alfa Laval was known as a doyen in the industry for dairies, breweries, distilleries, and chemical plants at that point of time. And then as a logical career step, I was, groomed to become a business unit manager, which would mean that you are responsible for the sub-profit and loss of the company. As a business division, you are responsible for the management of the people, management of the business, profit and loss, and then move away from a pure technical function that you continue to do that. And then what we do is that we are in a position to go into sales marketing, but also understand the elements of profit and loss management, which is finally the proof of pudding of any successful organization. Is you make profits, you make good cash flows, you have a strong balance sheet, a strong customer, loyal customer base, retention of the customers is something that I learned in my career in Alfa Laval. That was in 1997. Is the time when I moved slightly into another field domain, into what is called as the advanced process control systems in Tata Honeywell, now Honeywell at that point today, but at that point of time Tata Honeywell. So new emerging field, bordering between the manufacturing experience that I had and the IT experience that one would be getting into in the late 90s, which was a relatively emerging field for chemical process industry, for the IT industries to come in terms of database management, enterprise management of a chemical process plant. 1999, I moved into the real function of management of the company, where I moved into the organization called DSM, which was almost 10 billion guilders at that point of time, a Dutch company, but starting up the Indian organization. So it was a very interesting phase of career, because you work for a multinational, but at the same time, you are a country manager, a managing director for the operations, which is just starting, with a team of about 5-6 people, fairly entrepreneurial. Building up the market positions is what we had as our mandate at that point of time for a multinational high-end performance engineering plastics company, which is there. Bring in the global knowledge and experience, but manage the business in an Indian way with the global accounts, but also build up the Indian accounts in a regular manner. That was a very interesting career that I had for 11 years. I grew the business from 5 people to 500 people in terms of the organization, and building up the business from about 3 crores of revenues per annum to about 500 crores of revenues per annum. So that was something that was very interesting, challenging, but also very satisfying from the point of view of the end results that was declared. And this is what here I would call it as being a professional all throughout in my career. But at the same time, becoming what I would call it as an intrapreneur, not an entrepreneur, because entrepreneur is something who runs around his own business, has his own seed capital and grows the business, and he makes his own business success, which is there. Intrapreneur is the one who remains in the company and but runs the business as if he is running the business of his own, but with the capital and the profit and responsibility of an organization, is what I would say. So there, even I was, for I think one of the years, I was awarded an Entrepreneur of the Year award. That time, Praj Industries was running this scheme at that point of time. I was given that award. And 2011, I moved from a multinational career to an Indian company as the CEO of a chemical company called Aquapharm, where I delivered similar results, doubled the business turnover of the company in the span of 5 years. And the best part of that particular activity in Aquapharm Chemicals was, again, back to the chemical industry, a grassroots level, hardcore chemical business. So there was a lot of challenges, but a lot of opportunities which were there for the business. And I took the business to the global levels with a lot of big global customers, and 80% of the company's business was coming out of exports into Europe, Africa, Middle East, United States, Latin America, and Japan. So I had a huge exposure to the global markets in terms of both customers, but also from the point of view of supply chain management, because India, and what Mr. Modi is right now trying to put across to us, is that India needs to be becoming a global hub of exports. And what I see is, even in my current role, is for many of these industries, many of the global customers were strongly dependent on China as a supply base at this point of time. But 4 years back, pre-COVID and post-COVID, there's a very strong drive amongst the global organizations to move significantly away from China. It's not that the customers will move away, the global customers or global supply chain solutions will move from China in a completely 100% way. China will still remain as an decent size of a supplier. I don't know whether it's number 1, number 2, or number 3 position, but they will remain. But there is also a clear China plus 1 strategy. And that is where India has got an excellent opportunity. And both in my previous role in DSM, what I see in Aquafarm, and in my current role in the managing director of Zeman Schwarz, where I have a global role and an Indian role, India is becoming a star performer in terms of the business management at the international levels at this point of time. So coming back to the career part of it, 2016 is the time when I left Aquafarm and took a sabbatical for what I would call it as a gardening leave for 1 year, and then joined Zeman Schwarz, a German company. It's a 130 years old, 1 billion euros global chemical company, which is there with asset footprint all over. There I was initially the global sales and marketing director for one of their business divisions. But last 2-3 years, I've also been the additional responsibility for the managing director for Zeman Schwarz India. So 2 hats that I wear for the company. One is a global hat and one is the local Indian hat to manage and grow the business of Zeman Schwarz in the Indian environment. And in the last role that I just mentioned, a couple of months back, I made a presentation to the global management team on the big opportunities that one has for the growth for the multinationals in India, very specifically for the chemical sector that I represent at this point in time. And that has created a huge interest in terms of, the 1.4 billion people, 500 million middle class, the purchasing power of the people growing significantly, the aspirations to follow the good part of the Western business trends which are there, and leave aside the old paths, and the leveraging of what I would call it as that Indian environment where we have still the best arbitrage in terms of the cost position, but cost is only a small part of the total supply chain management at this point of time. The biggest part is to become a real good quality supplier, meeting the standards of the global requirements on specifications of a product that one would buy, whether it is a chemical going into detergents or into the leathers or into water treatment or any of these applications. Specifications are strongly driven, and that's where the Indian environment is in a position to capitalize and deliver a product flawlessly year after year to the market without any problems. And there, if you are able to manage this supply chain well, and we as India as a country are now in a position where we are excellent in terms of our supply chain management, in terms of delivering. Chinese are good, but we are far better than them in terms of our supply chain. When I compare ourselves with China as a position, and the biggest advantage is that our ability to bring in as an Indian, not only as a Zeman Schwarz employee or a Aquafarm or a DSM employee, that I would say, we as Indians are able to express ourselves extremely coherently, logically, both in the commercial parlance and a technical parlance to the international customers, which I think we are a couple of thousand times better than the Chinese in terms of their experiences. Chinese are simply price, and that's it, nothing more than that. Customers are interested in price, no doubt about it, but for them, understanding the technical part, the intellectual part, the compliance part of what is needed is extremely important. And today, we as an Indian organization are strongly meeting all the global requirements. I'll give you an example that in European Union, you need to have for chemicals approval, what is called as the REACH. Now, REACH is a short form of long-standing explanations, but it basically means that your chemicals are meeting the European standards requirements in terms of deliveries. And today, we as a country have got multitudes of suppliers who are in a position to deliver REACH compliances without any problems in terms of that. And then there are multiple, environmental compliances which we are standing compared to China. And biggest part is that we as Indians are able to bring in openness and transparency in our cost structure, our competitiveness as compared to China. China is a black box. People just don't know really what happens behind the black box. So that's an advantage for Indians. And so that's where is my 40 years of career with various multinational, but spanning over, I would call it as the chemical industry for a significant part, and the capital and the process control industry as a big part is what I have had in terms of manufacturing, project management, technical functions, sales, marketing, and business management. That's the summary of my path so far in my career. Thank you very much.
Wow, such an amazing and inspiring journey you've had, sir. Amazing.
Thank you very much.
So coming to the next one.
Yeah.
You've had a wide range of experiences in different roles and industries. So how do you believe this diversity has shaped your leadership style and approach to problem solving?
So, very good question, and thanks for that. The industries that I have been exposed to is chemicals, plastics, capital goods, and also the man-made fiber industry and the petrochemical industry significantly. So a fairly diverse way in terms of doing things in terms of the business environment. Now, one thing which is a common thread in all the industries that you work across, and here I'm more referring to the manufacturing industry, but although I am not experienced so much in the service industry, which is the big buzzword as on today in the Indian environment, but I believe it's applicable to that. The most important element that is required to be done, a couple of elements, let me put across the industries that you work across, is creating a value proposition to the customer. And once you are able to create your own value proposition to the customer, which the customer likes and buys into this particular value proposition, the business can be a long-term sustainable business where the situation that you work around with the customers is going to be a win-win situation. As a seller of the products, and the customer is a buyer of the product. So there is obviously an element of transaction that gets involved into the buying and selling. And there will be challenges from the smart purchasing managers that or purchasing directors that we come across, not limited only to the Indian customers, but I'm talking of the global customers. The global customers are extremely keen and sharp, and they are now the best masters of what I would call it as the Excel spreadsheets, where they will analyze your value chain, will break up your cost components to the last bone marrow and try and squeeze you. But at the same time, if you are able to create a value proposition to the customer, price is the last thing that you discuss with the customer. It's important to discuss it. You have to reach an agreement with it, but the customer will value your value proposition, and this value proposition that you deliver to the customer can encompass on the quality of the products, the supply chain management, just-in-time inventories that most of the customers are looking at in terms of management. Even many of the customers, in spite of being an Indian producer, want what is called as the vendor-managed inventory in Europe. So, managing the inventory is through the vendor management, through an SAP system, and then obviously becoming competitive on the cost price is something important, but you need not be the lowest in terms of the price. And that's what is the learning that I've had across the industries in terms of. Second is very specifically more experienced to the chemical industry. We are seen to be the bad boys from an environmental perspective. But I can tell you that today we are probably one of the very good boys in the manufacturing industry, which is that in spite of baking, our life is going to be there with chemicals. And when I say chemicals, it would mean the cosmetics that you ladies will surely use it, and we men will also use it in a significantly big way. But the detergents that we use in our house, the plastics that you use in the cars, etc., awareness of our products going to the environment and creating the environmental consciousness is something, and I will touch base also later on in some of the subjects. But that is another very important part of it. Third and the most important point is the long-term sustainability of the organization in terms of the business management, profits, planet, and the people of the organization. These what I would call is the triple P is extremely important for ensuring that the business success remains not only for 1 year, 2 years, but multiple decades is what I would put as the key success factors to grow in any of these industries. I hope I've covered some of the points that I thought freely expressing myself. Thank you.
Very well, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Coming to the next. In your career, you have worked both with multinational corporations and Indian-owned companies. So, can you describe the key differences in your experiences between the two types of organizations?
Okay, now this is a nice googly that you're putting across to me. So, considering that the World Cup is going on cricket, I think it's a very nice googly that you're put across. And I can be very open with you that, in many of the Indian cultures, it is seen that multinationals are seen to be far more attractive in terms of the choice of employers compared to the Indian organizations. Here, I would like to be far more attractive, and I would say if we have to do a sort of a detailed analysis between the Indian organizations and the multinational organizations, both of them have got their pluses, and both of them have got their minuses in terms of the positionings which are there. The pluses of the multinational organizations is quite good, that most of the multinational organizations have fairly strong product focus, global compliances on the products which are there. The systems and the processes that have been put into the multinational organizations are extremely good. And without wanting to make it black and white, I would say the relative corporate governance standards in the multinationals are at a higher level compared to the corporate governance structures that I would put into the Indian environment. Not that the Indian corporate structures are going to be bad, but on a relative scale, the global corporate structures are there. The disadvantages is that in the global, multinational organizations, typically people in most of the management functions would change every second year, third year, or the fourth year in terms of the positionings which are there, both for yourself, because I've had a role where I have played in the global organizations, in multinationals, both in India as well as in the global organizations. But a typical shelf life of a given position for 70% of the cases is going to be 3 to 5 years in terms of the maximum role if you perform well. If you don't perform well, then the disadvantage in the global multinationals is that if you have a first year which is bad in your performance and a second year, you're out. That's the chopping block, which is very clear, black and white. A chopping block comes on your head. So these are some of the disadvantages of the things. It is a perception that the global multinationals would pay you much better. Finally, we all work for some salary. Okay, so it's a perception that you get paid much higher for the global organizations, which was a true fact maybe a decade or so back. But today, it need not be necessarily the same. But still, on a benchmark perspective, I think from an individual compensation perspective, you would probably even get, and if you're a senior management in a multinational, you would get global ESOPs and that sort of stuff, which is there in terms of the advantages of the multinational organizations. Whereas for the Indian organizations, some of the things that we talk about are not so much applicable. In the good part of the Indian organizations, that we are more the management, let's put that way, whether it's an Aditya Birla Group or a Reliance, or, I mean, these are just examples, not necessarily applicable for all those things. But you have these big Indian corporate houses who have now caught up with the global multinational standard operating practices in a very big way in terms of doing. So that is something there. The big corporate houses are no way different because they have also become now reasonable multinationals, although of an Indian origin at this point of time. And then you have the mid-sized Indian companies and the small-side Indian companies. The small-side Indian companies are completely owner-driven. Sometimes even the mid-size are completely owner-driven, that you are professionally managed, but still at the whims and fancies of the owners. I mean, if the owner at one point of time decides to do a thing, and if you are even as a CEO of a company, if the owner is deciding a certain way, you may not necessarily be having the voting power or the right to take a decision compared. So the decision-making process in many of the Indian organizations is strongly driven by the apex management that would be there. And here I would say even the big multinationals that I just mentioned, big Indian companies would still, if Mr. Mukesh Ambani decides to do something, that's it. I mean, you cannot then challenge on that front, with no disrespect to him. He's also, by the way, a chemical engineer in a big way. So I have a lot of respect and learnings for him. I mean, being, out of Ambani family, still he got into UDCT and have came with flying colors from there. So with a lot of, but then the Indian owners would be the final decision-making processes which are there. Yeah, in multinationals, you can express your opinion very well without fear of a reprisal. In the Indian organizations, you have to be reasonably diplomatic, many times political in terms of your expressions towards, I'm not mincing my words, but you have to be political in terms of your experiences, especially in the board meetings that you're talking about, and the Indian stakeholders are there. You need to know what is the right do's and don'ts. Not that you don't have to be doing in multinationals, but you can be very open and clear. You have to disagree, you can disagree and express, and you can be very clear that nothing is going to be there, your disagreement. Decision is finally taken by the hierarchy or the consensus that is built up at that point of time. On the Indian organizations, many times, especially if it's a family-based, the decision is strongly driven by the family organizations. And that can be many times a challenge to the professionals, not only at the CXO levels, but even at the operating level, that you have to many times fall in line with. But then it also ensures that you get a huge amount of freedom and ability to take decision-making process in an Indian environment. You can at least bring out multitudes of applications. Whereas in the multinationals, you have to follow the global dikkat of what needs to be done into the Indian environment. Salary-wise, I think most of the multinationals have even beaten the global multinationals at this point of time. I mean, I know of many of these big companies that I even just mentioned. They pay packages which are significantly more than the multinationals would pay into the Indian environment, which is there. At the end, also what happens is that the corporate governance standards can be slightly at a lower scale in the Indian environment compared to especially the mid-size and the small size companies, especially the smaller size companies. The corporate governance standards can many times go for a toss, very honestly, at that point of time. Environmental compliances, the Indian companies would try and find a way, what we call it as a jugaad method of getting the things done at this point of time. Whereas in a multinational, I work for a multinational now. We are a relatively smaller setup, but we still have to completely comply with the global standards, including reporting structures. So these are, I would say, correlating as the pluses and the minuses of the Indian and the global. I mean, it's not that this is right or that is wrong. I mean, that's not something that I would like to make at any point of time. Both have their own strengths, own advantages, and one needs to then decide and adjust what is more important for me in terms of my career path is what is put that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your valuable inputs.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah. So now, how and when did you develop an interest in ESG and corporate governance?
Okay. Both the environments. Now, here there are two, you have put in two things at the same question. Okay. ESG and corporate governance. In my eyes, these are important elements. To a certain extent, they are linked to each other. But to a certain extent, they are fairly independent of each other. ESG, in my eyes, would be a subset of the corporate governance in terms of what is required to be done. Now, corporate governance, again, and okay, I wouldn't say subset, but there is an interdependence of the two circles that we're talking about in terms of. So I would then like to divide the subject into ESG and corporate governance as two separate subjects, if you permit me to do that. Touching base on ESG, okay. Now, ESG has got from a manufacturing industry that I come from point of view, I have got two components involved into it. One is an internal organizational, what we call the interest on ESG. And second is the external part of it, what I would call it as our customer base and the effect of ESG on a customer base, on the products and services that we sell to our customers at this point. Okay, these are the two elements which are there. Many cases today, ESG is becoming mandatory, but still not legally mandatory in terms of what needs to be done in terms of the corporate governance. Many of the elements of corporate governance, there is a mandatory component and there is an optional component. ESG to a significant extent is optional, but not from the point of view of a strong image in the market. So let me first touch base. My interest started in, I would say, late 90s when I was actually starting working for DSM at that point of time from an environmental perspective. We used to manufacture engineering plastics, and these engineering plastics were, they go into switchboards, they go into cables, they go into MCBs, they go into automotive applications, etc. Now, from the external perspective, one of the biggest value propositions that we had to bring in to a Maruti Suzuki or to a Tata Motors or to even a Honda in Japan was an environmental aspect of usage of plastics in a car. People used to manufacture cars with a huge component of metal into it. And we had a value proposition to these customers saying that, look here, you convert into your metal part, whether it is a door handle, whether it's a mirror bracket, or whether it is an engine component, you shift from metal, which has a density of 8, to a plastic, which has got a density of 1.5. That means your weight comes down by 70% to 80% in terms of the component usage. I guarantee to you, with my excellent quality performance, with all the technical support, including CAD/CAM solutions that we offer to them, saying that my plastic is going to replace your metal. And we did that significantly with all the Indian automotive and two-wheelers, four-wheelers. We converted there was a time when we converted the metal parts into plastic parts in a significant way. Biggest advantage is ESG from an environmental perspective. When the weight of the car comes down by a few kilos, or a two-wheeler by 2 or 3, 4 kilos, the fuel consumption and the fuel efficiency that it would bring in from the point of view of usage and impact on the environment. I mean, if I start consuming, instead of giving 8 kilometers a liter, if my car starts giving 10 kilometers a liter, and I multiply that by 3 or 4 million cars that gets manufactured and the 10 million two-wheelers that get, the impact of energy would be, the usage would be significantly good, which would be there. And then people would say, okay, plastic, it's environmentally bad, but not engineering plastics is what we had to explain, because the life of the product is still going to be 25, 30, 40 years at this point of time. It's not a single-use plastic, which is different than the multi-use plastic that we're bringing out in terms of it. So that was one of the first biggest brushes that I had with the environmental governance, which created a huge, what I would call it as a multi-billion opportunity of business for us. So we are combining business, combining environmental consciousness, reducing the carbon footprint all over the world in terms of the emissions which are there. To such an extent, I can be proud about it that when Tata's decided to launch Nano, it was a completely drawing board project that Mr. Ratan Tata had. The Tata Motors invited us. I was at the time the MD of DSM, Engineering Plastics, and we were given an opportunity to say, okay, you pick up the part of the car which you can make in plastics. And we engineered, participated actively with the designers to make 25 parts of Nano in plastics right from the base. And it gave them a huge efficiency in terms of the operations. Apart from the economic benefits, which are assumed that as a supplier, you have to bring in economic benefits on the part cost management, which was there. So this is one of the best examples that I have. Second best example that I had done with the global organization, Apple, to give an example, when I was working with DSM. Apple, we all see the white colored Apple tools with the cable which charges the Apple iPods or the MacBooks which are there. They used to use PVC for the lining, okay, or for the cover of the sheeting of the cable. PVC has got what is called as chlorine, because polyvinyl chloride is what PVC is. In the event of a fire or something, or even the end of the life of the cable which is there, it's going to emit chlorine, which is going to have a very bad greenhouse effect. So we engineered a product, a thermoplastic polymer, which was completely what I would call it as a halogen-free, that means chlorine-free product, but giving an exactly identical performance, but priced at 3 times the level of PVC in the market. And selling that concept to Apple, and at that point of time, Steve Jobs was still there. And he personally ensured that he completely switches over to an environmentally conscious product, which is there at this point. So that's one example which is there. Third example for the environmental consciousness. Sorry for the long story again here.
No, it's amazing.
Yeah, I will tell you, in the electrical components, all in our houses, we use what is called as the MCB, miniature circuit breaker board. Okay. All the miniature circuit breaker board manufacturers in India, whether it is Havells, whether it is Schneider, whether it is many other people used to manufacture these MCBs, which had halogen into it. It has to be flame retardant. It had halogen into it. Extremely bad environmental impact, because the moment you have a spark, it will get burnt and the environment gets damaged. We were the pioneers to introduce, in my corporate world in DSM, a halogen-free plastics, which our competition followed later on for us, because that's normal in life. Brought in halogen-free enclosures, plastics for the MCB manufacturing and all the electrical components. And today, the industry standard is clear. All the electricals, whether it is an MCB contractor, are going to be halogen-free in terms of this. But we were the pioneers bringing in global technology, but Indian manufacturing and Indian cost structure to meet the requirements of the applications of the market. These are the three brushes that I had in terms of the environmental consciousness, which is there. Third and interesting thing was in my chemical world, when I was working with Aquafarm, we worked around, is that being conscious, we had coal-fired boilers available with us, and we converted them into gas-fired and later on moved to a renewable energy. So today, I think one of the things that we drive significantly is the carbon footprint of the whole life cycle management, what I would call it as the cradle-to-cradle usage of the energy management. So moving significantly to the renewable energy in the chemical manufacturing or in any manufacturing process is something that is going to be pioneered and developed. And with all the major global customers that I deal with in the consumer space, in the FMCG space, in the industrial environment, everybody values the component of the carbon footprint, which comes out of coal-fired boilers or that sort of stuff, and moving towards the renewable energy. The green energy is something that is extremely important for the manufacturing sector from an energy perspective. And I've been practicing this now significantly for the last 20 years in my professional career to the usage of the green energy. So one part is the effect of ESG on the end products of the applications, whether it's a car, an electrical switchgear, or an Apple iPod. And second is your own backyard of manufacturing, where you manufacture the products out of what we call non-fossil fuel-based products from the green energy. So this has been very actively practiced for the last 2 years. So that's my take on the ESG. It's going to be, in future, not going to be a differentiator. It's going to be a qualifier for you to be remaining as a sustained supplier towards the market with an awareness of energy, which is ESG. Second part is the corporate governance that we talked about. Okay. Now, the corporate governance has got two components: the internal corporate governance and the external corporate governance. Because you finally, and let me touch base on an external corporate governance part of it. The external corporate governance, you work with multiple stakes and agencies, whether it is the customs department of custom clearance, or whether it is the compliances with the government on the Ministry of Corporate Affairs in terms of openness and transparency, that the board or the managing, and here the corporate governance, I would say, starts at the top, at the board level, in terms of bringing in the right systems, processes, and practices. That simple thing is, in multinationals, we always followed what I would call it as a zero corruption policy in terms of revenue. Now, you know that, and we know that very well. It's a challenge in the Indian environment to manage this whole business environment. But we believe in a corporate standard that have your books cleaned. And I'm not only talking of the accounting books. I'm talking of my environmental book. I'm talking of my supply chain book. I'm talking of my documentation. Make it completely clean and transparent in terms of the corporate governance, which starts with the top, from the chairman to the managing director to the operating people, that do not deviate from the standards that you're looking in terms of the corporate governance. Then the need for doing something with what I call it as a teda ungli ka thing is not really needed in terms of the corporate governance. If you manage your whole documentation, books, clean processes which are required to be done, that's extremely important. And the moment you do that, then you are able to manage your external environment in an extremely proper, professional way. Sometimes it might take a bit of a time, that if you have a slightly nutty, factory inspector who's going to challenge you a bit more, saying that, I'm going to help you out, but do some favors for me. We say, no, sorry, we don't do it in terms of corporate governance. We stick to that. Here are my books. You take 10 days to look at my books. I have no problems. I'm going to sit for 10 days with you, but explain the whole thing to you instead of shortcutting it for 2 days. So that's the external part of the corporate governance. But here, the openness, willingness, and the strong will of the board to set up examples to the people down the line and ensuring that the compliance is done is extremely important in terms of corporate governance. So, but this is an extremely important factor that today being rated high, and I suppose there's nothing, nobody rates you on the corporate governance in a formal way like your financial ratings, which might happen with the multiple agencies, but that really helps us to have a clean, open, transparent governance in terms of the organization. And then there are standard compliances, whether it's a corporate affairs, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, declarations, board meetings, notes, books, etc., everything that needs to be done. But that's a logical consequence of the philosophy that the board sets up to the organization. That's my take on the corporate governance.
Wow. Bundle full of knowledge, sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
So, sir, as an ESG and corporate governance expert, what values do you bring to the table?
Okay, the values that I bring to the table here are, first is ESG is not, and the value was maybe a decade back. ESG was seen to be a word which is, yeah, nice to hear on the boardrooms, nice on the press releases, etc. But today, the value of ESG is something which is extremely important. You cannot translate that into monetary gains. This is something that, we are today living in a planet. 100 years down the line, our grandchildren and their grandchildren will be living, and we have to leave the planet to them in an environmental fashion that they enjoy living it in a smooth, clean air, the smooth, clean life that we are enjoying at least at the same level that is there at this point of time. So that is an important element for the ESG. And corporate governance is something that is also quite clear that the long-term sustainability, and I've worked with companies with more than 100 years of existence. You have a typical average life of a company globally is only 20, 25 years. But if you want to have an organization, if you have a good corporate governance structure, there is going to be a life cycle which is going to be perpetual for the company in terms of, and that's going to be an important element. Okay, you still need to manage your business well, etc. But the management of the business nicely happens for all the stakeholders, whether it is a shareholder, whether it is the management, whether it is the employee, whether it is the man on the street. If you have a very good corporate governance, he's going to like you. And that is something is going to be long-term sustainable in terms of the corporate governance. So both these components are going to be the lifeline for the business to remain sustainable in the future in a significantly manner way. That's what is my take on the subject. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Sir, what are some of the most remarkable changes you have seen in your field with the changes in technology? And what changes do you expect to see with the advent of IoT, AI, ML, blockchain, big data, and Web 3.0?
Okay, now this is going to be a tricky question for me. To be very honest with you, I am not an IT guy. From the point of view of, apart from knowing that IoT, machine learning, or artificial intelligence, or the blockchains are going to significantly change our lifestyles in a significantly way. The impact of IoT or machine learning, etc., is, and I come from a manufacturing industry perspective, and when I separate out completely what I would call it as a B2B business is what I'm doing it. And then I'm differentiating it with the B2C business in the manufacturing side, and then the service industry that is going to happen over a period of time. In my opinion, the pecking order in which the impact of IoT or MLs, etc., will come up, and here I'm a bit generic, is going to be more significantly impact on the service industries that we talk about. Today, the way Google's or the Facebook's or any of these tools which are there are impacting our life based on the ML or the IoT, is going to be significantly, immediately important in terms of doing it. The next impact is going to be on the B2C applications, where the big database management, the information systems, technologies on what should be put on the shelf, should there be a Colgate toothpaste with the blue color or white color or green color, is something the consumer faces is what is going to bring out. And that's where the Colgate management will be extremely important in knowing the big data management, what are the consumer things. The impact on the B2B, where I have been working around, is going to be relatively lesser compared to what it is, at least in the next 1 decade or two. Now, having said this, lesser, but still it is going to be, and that's where I experience and knowledge in terms of doing it, is many of these things are going to help us in optimizing our supply chains in a significantly. Inventory becomes a very big part of our cost management at this point of time, especially when you're looking at the cross-border transatlantic type of solutions that we or supply chains that we give. IoT ML will significantly impact vendor management inventories that we would get in terms of the information technologies, can significantly impact the B2B businesses which are there at this point of time in a significantly. Will the impact be as big as what one would look at Google ads coming up? The answer is no, it's not likely to be happening. But surely it is going to improve the business line in a significant way, bringing in the way these tools are going to change the way we procure things. These tools are going to change the way we manufacture things. These tools are going to change the way we deliver the products to our customers. So customers will give us access to their information systems. We will give access to our systems to the customers. At the end of the day, whatever is the fact that is lying in the whole supply chain management in the manufacturing industry, that fact will significantly get dissolved by usage of these tools of artificial intelligence or machine learnings, or especially the big data management is going to, suppose I have to procure 1,000 different items. And if I go with the big data management, exactly when do I need, what do I need, and my supply chain, my customer management, I can probably double my profits over a period of time. That's something that is possible to do. But okay, the impact will never be like what it would be. Like if I go to the Google and went to the Lufthansa site, the next minute I will start getting alternative airlines coming up on my website. But that's not likely to happen with the manufacturing sector immediately. But yes, it will significantly bring an impact on supply chain and the cost management structure and meeting the customers' expectations in terms of the just-in-time deliveries. So these are the three components which can significantly impact the manufacturing industry that I represent at this point. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
So now we are building a community of industry magnets. The move is meant for cross-pollination of knowledge and building a knowledge-sharing community of corporate giants and industry experts. So what are your thoughts about this initiative taken by Mr. Zishan Pathan, Mr. Heval Mehta, and the whole World Development Corporation team?
Firstly, my kudos and my real appreciation for the building up of this particular community, which is required to be done. It is extremely important because you see, there are three types of people, let's put that way, in the corporate world today. Okay, one is there is a set of veterans who have got huge amount of experience and knowledge which they have, and it's a big things diverse across the industry, across the sectors, etc., that they bring in. We are all not perpetual livers in the world today. Someday or the other, and this particular platform will enable the veterans of the industry to the other two components. One is the veterans pass on the knowledge to the existing set of what I would call as the workhorses of the management. And then there are the emerging talent group, the next generation, which is coming up, which is going to be much younger than what we are at this point of time. Surely they have a different set of energy, different set of understanding, especially in the technological, fresh thinking which is there. But the veterans can participate in a very active manner to share their knowledge, experience, be guide, coach, philosopher, and hold hands to them to ensure that the bumpy rides that we might have had in our historical development, where I never had a coach for a certain part of my time, some parts I had, but it helps to become a coach in a significantly way manner. And here one can dissect depending on the industry knowledge, geography, experience, what industry that you're working on, and train and coach the next generations coming up in a big way. Finally, they will decide the ownership to do the things will remain with the next generation. But then we can become an hand-holding tool for them to ensure that their success is there, and the landmines that they might face, we could try and warn them about it and coach them in the right way. So this is an excellent initiative, and it will help us and the next generations to really take the business to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind words. Wow, great. It was a fantastic conversing with you, sir, and I'm confident that your insights will inspire future leaders. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. wish you the best for your future endeavors. Moreover, trust that this initiative by Directors Institute unquestionably has expanded the participants' understanding and enriched their minds. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. Have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.